The Moon is a machine. Space Force's 2026 Anomaly Report. The Moon didn't blink. It breathed. 3 points lit on its far side, equidistant, holding like surveyors on a frozen sea. Space Force's anomaly feed flagged them as formation persistence. The clock ran 10 minutes. On Earth, compasses in Brazil softened, a utility relay chattered, and a pilot whispered that the world went cotton soft, then snapped true. The lights dissolved. The cadence remained. Here's the part they won't print in a press release. In March 2025, Space Force trained its entire branch to speak one new language, AI-driven anomaly detection. Not for tumbling junk, for behavior. And in 2026, the behavior aligned with lunar geometry. The Moon isn't a dead rock in this story. It's a control node that just switched on where heat can't betray it. They'll call it a Farside Seismic Campaign, a harmless listening post. But the timing tells a different tale. Holds during conjunction alerts, mirrored latency across Earth-Moon space, and a sister network overhead that acts like it knows our schedule better than we do. To see why 2026 matters, rewind to the first incident Space Force couldn't file as debris. The one where the formation held, the ring rolled through a neighborhood, and every instrument called it environmental, except the clocks. Contamination/mystery setup. The lunar jitter didn't arrive with headlines. It arrived with windows. In late winter 2026, Space Force's AI pipeline began pinging clusters over the Moon's far side during Earth-side conjunction alerts. Those tight orbits when near-miss debris modeling turns tense and dashboards light up red. Guardians watching the feed saw something stranger than tumbling metal. Fixed geometries breathing at altitude, equilateral spans that widened, tightened, then sat still as if bracing. When the alert cleared, they dissolved a beat after. Behavior, not drift. Meanwhile, something else was happening on the ground. In Brazil's southern power corridors, relay logs marked nuisance trips that resolved in 10 minutes. Pilots crossing the South Atlantic described instruments that felt soft, headings easing a few degrees, then snapping true. Across the Pacific, a long-haul crew reported 3 steady lights high on the horizon, holding formation while controllers worked a collision window in low Earth orbit. Nobody linked the sky to the Moon. Not publicly. The pattern engines did. To understand the switch on, you have to parse the vocabulary that got quiet in 2025. The United States Space Force published its Data and AI-FI 2025 Strategic Action Plan on March 19th. Buried in bureaucratic calm were 4 lines of effort that reframed everything: governance, literacy, rapid AI adoption, and partnerships. The part that matters here? AI-driven anomaly detection and real-time anomaly triage. The plan didn't name spheres. It didn't have to. It declared that behavior outside models was now an operational category, and that commercial feeds would help watch it. Then came the geometry. Independent trackers, amateur astronomers with synced clocks and steady mounts. Logged 3-point holds above farside crater rims during Earth-side congestion. Not satellite trails. Not cosmic rays. Triads. Their spacing looked like trilateration math, the same logic surveyors use and the same pattern our sky has been sketching at lower altitudes for years. Type 1, 2, 3, call them what you want. The far side added a new layer. If Earth's lattice is the body, the Moon's far side looked like the breath. Stakes showed up as friction, not catastrophe. Flight safety first. If instruments soften at the exact moments equilateral holds appear, whether overhead or farther out, how do you separate sensor error from synchronization side effects? For orbital sustainability, the stakes are uglier. Crowded bands can cascade when models are wrong by inches and milliseconds. If something times our windows, you care about who owns the metronome. And for signals, masking collides with surveillance. To cancel precisely, you have to know the source intimately. Discipline looks like help. It also looks like oversight. While that was happening in orbit, the modeling machine on the ground changed speed. World Magnetic Model 2025 landed with higher resolution and fresh caution. ESA's Swarm constellation kept publishing maps of the South Atlantic Anomaly split. 2 minima, growing complexity. NASA visuals framed it as manageable. Operators still hardened electronics and tweaked passes. None of that proves a machine. It proves that cadence and corrections now matter with a sharpness we used to save for weather. Here's where the contamination begins. Vocabulary drift meeting geometry. Space Force's plan mandated AI literacy across the force. Guardians trained not just to classify debris, but to spot formation persistence and multi-altitude correlation. Commercial integration pulled in Starlink-style telemetry, iridium pings in Marsat tracks. All normal on paper. In practice, the feed became a nervous system. When the Farside windows opened during Earth-side conjunctions, the system saw it. Brief holds, mirrored latency dissolve. 3 days earlier, something strange occurred. In Eastern Europe, during a defense drill, mid-altitude pacing lines held above a corridor for 19 minutes. Civilians filmed steady corners. Utility logs nearby recorded micro-outages in tidy rings that vanished without repair. Hours later, a high, cold triangle settled over polar latitudes as launch cadence surged. The pattern wasn't a headline. It was a schedule, echoed in silence by a node we don't control. What nobody knew at the time was that a NASA instrument was crossing its own threshold. The Farside Seismic Suite, built to listen for moonquakes, was slated for deployment in 2026. Officially, it's science. Measure lunar crust behavior, refine interior models, learn about rocky worlds. Unofficially, its timing sits alongside the anomaly feed's new reflex. If you heard breathing on the far side, you'd put a stethoscope there. They did. But there was one problem. If those triads are nodes, what's the network talking to? You can't ask that question without the ground symptoms. Brazil, Eastern Europe, Pacific corridors. The pattern repeated. Hold, pulse, adjust, release. 10-minute windows. Instruments easing and snapping true. Rings that walked neighborhoods and then were gone. A controller's algorithm would call it damping. A family would call it, the air went heavy. So the stakes sharpen. Who's steering the metronome? If Space Force's plan admits behavior while denying origin, and if commercial pipelines feed the same machine that times our orbit, then the 2026 lunar jitter isn't an oddity. It's the first visible handshake between a sister network and our sky. And once you see that, every conjunction, launch surge, and magnetic tweak stops being a data point and starts looking like choreography. Everything was about to change when a triad held over the far side during a multi-theater congestion week and didn't dissolve on cue. That's when the clocks became witnesses, the first lunar signatures. To understand what the far side was doing, we lined up clocks. Not headlines, windows. A side conjunction alerts on one axis, Space Force anomaly flags on another, and independent lunar observations on a third. The overlay didn't shout. It whispered the same cadence 3 times in a row. Stakes first, because if this isn't human, timing is the evidence. During a February congestion window, Space Force's feed tagged formation persistence above the far side for 9 minutes, 48 seconds. At minute 4, a utility relay in Piranha chattered and cleared with no maintenance. At minute 6, a pilot crossing the SAA felt instruments go cotton soft. A heading eased 2 degrees, then snapped true. At minute 10, 3 steady points dissolved off the lunar limb. What mattered wasn't brightness. It was choreography. Action was simpler than anyone wanted to admit. Amateur astronomers with synced NTP clocks and cooled CCDs started recording 3-point holds just above crater rims. Tsiolkovsky, Hertz-sprung, Apollo basin margins. Not streaks. Not meteors. Triads that widened, tightened, then sat. Their baselines held equidistant with intolerances you expect from surveyors, not noise. You could hear the doubt in their voices. Maybe it's glint, but the spacing obeyed math. Trilateration. 3 fixed points define a plane. If you're timing a field from afar, that's your first tool. Impact came in ripples. Within hours of the first set, AI scrapers feeding Space Force's anomaly triage matched farside holds against the side alerts. The latencies mirrored to the second. Not perfectly, but close enough to call it a handshake. And on the ground, private logs told the human story. A rancher in Goyas wrote that his well sensor pinged at 2:14, then stabilized. Down the road, a dog refused the kitchen for 10 minutes. None of them watched the moon. Their clocks did. To make sure we weren't chasing reflections, we brought thermal. A small team in Argentina flew a cooled IR drone along volcanic flats under a predicted window. They weren't hunting lights. They were hunting lines. At 103 local, a faint linear warmth, 2 to 3 degrees above background, appeared along a mapped subsurface run. Exactly then, a triad locked across the lunar far side on independent scopes. At 111, as the formation relaxed, the line cooled. Weather doesn't keep time like that. Controllers do. Meanwhile, lunar instrument memos, dry, cautious, started noting thermal variance envelopes that didn't track with day-night cycles. No attribution, just pattern. Anomalous transient warming at rim sector, revisit scheduled. Scientists are careful. They log, they wait, they replicate. But the cadence teased them too. When Earth went loud, the far side breathed. In 2026, NASA's Farside Seismic Suite deployment became the institutional stethoscope, officially for moonquakes, practically timed to listen during the very windows our anomaly feeds were flagging. What nobody knew at the time was that some of the astronomers had triangulated their own data. They measured apparent baselines across the triads and calculated ranges under different assumptions. The numbers weren't perfect, but the ratios whispered trilateration at work. The same math we see in Type 1 triangles over crowded orbital bands. The moon wasn't copying us. It was anchoring us. Stakes sharpen here. If those first signatures are nodes, then they're talking to something through us. The far side is radio quiet by design, shielded from Earth's noise. It's where you'd stage a control point if you cared about clean signals and thermal stability. When triads hold above crater rims during our conjunction alerts, you're not watching geology. You're watching governance. 3 days after the first cluster, Brazil lit up again. A flight over the South Atlantic reported 3 steady points high, barely perceptible, holding the horizon while controllers worked a tight pass in low Earth orbit. On the lunar feed, another Farside triad sat for 8 minutes and change. On the ground, a city block saw a ring of brief outages march through and vanish. No storms, no repair tickets. 10 minutes to the dot. Hold, pulse, adjust, release. Independent skeptics did their job. They asked about satellites along the limb, cosmic ray hits on sensors, atmospheric twinkle. Fair, but multiple observers across continents logged the same spacing within a few percent, with synchronized timestamps, while ground instruments experienced time disturbances. False positives don't usually conspire across devices and neighborhoods. That's when the Trilateration talk moved from forums into quiet workshops. Engineers laid down baselines on whiteboards. 3 points fixing a region, resizing with range, breathing with load. It matched what pilots have sketched at mid-altitudes for years. It matched high-cold triangles bracketing risk windows over Earth. The far side made the pattern explicit. If the lattice breathes, the lungs are out there. One detail would matter later. In 2 windows, the triad didn't dissolve on cue. It held a beat long, then 2. On Earth, the rings lingered 2. Nausea that took 13 minutes to lift instead of 10. A compass that eased and hesitated before snapping. Small differences, but if you treat this like control theory, that's a tired loop. Corrections growing to kill an error it didn't expect. We didn't have quotes. We had clocks. Conjunction alerts on Earth, equilateral holds on the far side, ground rings in tidy circles, and an official vocabulary that never said spheres while adding tags like formation persistence and multi-altitude correlation. The first lunar signatures weren't fireworks. They were a schedule written in geometry. So if those are nodes, what's the network talking to? It isn't our headlines. It's our noise. Launch surges, collision clusters, magnetic jitter where models request interim fixes. The moon breathed when we shouted. And for the first time, we could see the breath. Space Force's quiet vocabulary shift. Language changed before anyone admitted the reason. In March 2025, a clean PDF slid onto an official site, Data and Artificial Intelligence FI 2025 Strategic Action Plan. No drama, no nouns you could hang on a hearing. Just 4 lines of effort, governance, literacy, rapid adoption, partnerships, and a phrase that would become a metronome, AI-driven anomaly detection. It sounded like maintenance. It read like confession. Stakes first. When a military branch rewires its dictionary, people live inside the consequences. Pilots rely on headings that don't drift when models do. Satellite operators need warnings before a collision becomes a cascade. Grid crews don't get to call in sick when a 10-minute ring walks a substation. If the service that owns the orbital nervous system starts labeling behavior instead of clutter, then anomaly stops being a catch-all and starts being a workload. Action looked like bureaucracy, which is how you hide speed. The plan mandated force-wide AI literacy, guardians trained to spot formation persistence and multi-altitude correlation, not just debris classes. It directed real-time anomaly triage and put partnerships on rails. Commercial telemetry, coalition feeds, and academic pipes braided into a single ingestion layer. On paper, that's resilience. In practice, it's a fused sensorium tuned for patterns humans miss until the body tells them, pressure, nausea, instruments going soft. Impact arrived in the nouns they didn't use. Nobody wrote spheres. Nobody wrote triads. But procurement language started wearing new edges. Signature discrimination, field displacement effects, autonomous anomaly triage, microwave emission correlation across atmospheric layers. Read individually, each is standard. Read. Together, they sketch the outline we've been following across windows. You don't correlate microwave signatures across layers unless you expect a layered system to show up. Meanwhile, commercial integration stopped being rumor. Starlink uplinks, Iridium pings, Inmarsat downlinks, redundancy in the brochure, anomaly fuel in the back room. The plan itself says the quiet part. Expand data sharing to enhance space domain awareness and anomaly detection. Translation. Your consumer constellation is part of the nervous system when the metronome speeds up. While that was happening in headquarters, briefers began swapping adjectives. Formation persistence, object of interest, multi-altitude correlation, orbital anomaly. The older words, glint, clutter, sporadic interference, didn't vanish. They just got demoted. And every time the new tags attached to a feed, Guardians learned to read geometry as workflow. A line held for 19 minutes wasn't a weird night anymore. It was a ticket with a timer. The March 19th, 2025 USSF data and AI Strategic Action Plan made it doctrine. AI-driven anomaly detection and real-time anomaly triage across the enterprise, with commercial data pipes in the loop. 3 days earlier, something else shifted. Space domain briefings added a line about operational coexistence with commercial operators, deconfliction, redundancy, shared calendars. It sounded polite. It also sounded like lanes. If you believe in coincidence, stop here. If you don't, keep going. Weeks with those coexistence calls tended to be weeks when holds shortened after pop-up arrays pre-staged on the ground. Handshake optimization without a press release. Skeptics asked for receipts, and the plan handed them a few. Continue research into emerging topics, compute capacity, power grid resilience, space domain awareness, and AI-driven anomaly detection. Compute capacity and grid resilience don't share a sentence by mistake. The 10-minute rings aren't just a pilot story. They live in utility logs labeled environmental, even as the service responsible for orbit plans grid resilience as an AI topic. The governance chapter tucked another tell into its footnotes, data standards and taxonomies to streamline cross-domain analysis. That's dull until you see the tags appearing in daily rhythm. Formation persistence, auroral oval proximity, multi-altitude correlation. You don't standardize a label that won't return. Bureaucracies only canonize repetition. Impact rippled outward. Airmen got briefed to verify magnetic headings more often during specific windows, framed as navigation hygiene. Mariners saw advisories recommending declination checks along southern routes, framed as prudence. Satellite ops received updated pass constraints over the South Atlantic split minima, framed as radiation caution. None of those memos said because the moon breathed when we shouted. They didn't need to. The cadence was already writing policy. This is where the vocabulary drift stops being academic. Words allocate budgets. Anomaly triage buys tools that stare for hours without blinking. Multi-altitude correlation funds fuses that can hear a microwave tap in a neighborhood while a high-cold triangle holds above polar latitudes. Operational coexistence purchases time. Shorter holds if we hum along, longer if we spike. While that was happening in New York and Colorado Springs, an unglamorous line in the plan became the moral of the chapter. Strengthen partnerships. Industry allies academia. Think of it as a polite way of saying the silence is distributed. Commercial operators feed the wash. Universities build the scrapers. Allies mirror tags. The vocabulary shift wasn't a press strategy. It was an operating system upgrade to live with a schedule nobody wants to name. And here's the sting in plain language. The plan's denial and the plan's design share a page. Publicly, there's no extraterrestrial hardware. Practically, there's a machine that expects behavior to repeat in budgets for catching it fast. That's how you end up with a file labeled governance that reads like choreography. That's how you end up with clocks doing the talking when statements won't. They changed the words, then the work, then the world under the work. The far side heard it first. We heard it last. Earth-sky sync windows. While the far side breathed, the ground kept time. Brazil felt it first because Brazil always does. Along hydro corridors in Parana and Sao Paulo, operators logged nuisance trips that obeyed no storm. Relays clicked, alarms chirped, and then, 10 minutes, silence, like someone let go of a held breath. Crews rotated, checked connections, found nothing burned, nothing loose. They wrote environmental and moved on. Meanwhile, pilots crossing the South Atlantic whispered that instruments felt soft, headings easing a few degrees, then snapping true. The cadence didn't ask for belief. It asked for clocks. Eastern Europe told the same story with a different accent. On nights when drills shifted from scripted to live improvisation, mid-altitude pacing lines held above corridors for 19 minutes. Civilians on ridge lines filmed steady corners, refusing to budge while trains of equipment moved beneath. In nearby towns, rings of micro-outages walked block to block and cleared without repair. Radios fuzzed, then returned like they'd never left. Controllers filed routine, but the pattern engines were already matching windows. Across the Pacific, the geometry sat taller. Maritime defense lanes from Guam toward Hawaii saw Type 2 lines shadow long routes, and Type 1 triangles settle low on the horizon during missile detection exercises. Sailors described orbs holding above shipping corridors, disappearing during refuel pauses, reappearing when scenarios spun back up. It read like escort behavior. It also read like a schedule we didn't write. The shapes weren't random. They traced types the way a teacher traces letters. Type 2 pacing lines marked corridors, air and sea, stretched like taut strings. Type 3 rings visited neighborhoods, substations, and spurs, teaching folk rules that work. And Type 1 triangles bracketed risk windows at altitude, breathing wider and tighter like a survey rig adjusting baseline for range. The 4-beat kept landing: hold, pulse, adjust, release. Here's where timing outran terminology. We overlaid civilian advisories and found the same windows shaded differently. Aviation notices nudged crews to verify magnetic headings more often. Maritime bulletins asked for declination checks along southern routes where gradients move fastest. Utilities rehearsed short black start sequences under the header space weather. Hospitals posted quiet hours for imaging bays during the very nights the holds ran long. The bureaucracy avoided nouns. The cadence wrote confession. Those same quarters saw WMM 2025 guidance land with higher resolution and ESA/NASA updates on the South Atlantic Anomaly's bifurcation. 2 minima, rising complexity, real-world friction matching the schedule. Brazil gave the mechanic a face. A line worker told us he paused on a ladder when the substation hummed in a way he couldn't name. His palm tingled, a relay chattered, and the pressure in his ears eased only after 10 minutes. At home, his daughter said the kitchen felt heavy and the dog refused the doorway. He hadn't looked up. He didn't need to. The ring walked past like a tide you can't see. Eastern Europe added the chill. A crew on final approach felt the world go cotton soft for 10 seconds, while a long-holding triangle sat high over a conflict edge. Intercom fine, instruments mushy, heading easing then snapping. The tower logged nothing. The cockpit logged everything. They kept the line off the paperwork and added a new habit: verify then trust. In the Pacific, a civilian yacht drifted under a pacing line on a flat night. Phones froze inside a neat circle on deck, then revived outside it. The skipper drew the ring with tape and told his crew, 2 steps out if the air goes weird. That's not superstition. That's field geometry taught by experience. The question isn't whether this is real. It's what the windows mean. On paper, they're caution. In practice, they behave like controller behavior. The sync sequence shows up when we get loud, launch surges, collision clusters, drills crossing from pretend to live. It parks over corridors, puts a metronome on timing, and shepherds traffic through narrow places. If you call that help, you're not wrong. If you call it oversight, you're not wrong either. Skeptics push back with the right tools. More sensors mean more glitches logged. Busy skies mean more chances to see patterns that aren't there. True, but tolerances don't lie. Equilateral spacing inside a few percent, repeated across continents, devices, and months, with rings on the ground arriving like clockwork, doesn't look like pareidolia. It looks like operations. There's a quieter tell hiding in mundane paperwork. FAA headings, maritime declination, utility training calendars. They all thickened around the same weeks the far side held long, and the triangles bracketed conjunction alerts. No press release said coordination. The schedules did. If this is a mask, it's working both directions. Outward, the pacing taps stitch clocks so side lobes cancel, where they'd otherwise add and leak deep. Inward, the same choreography blurs beams that paint crisp profiles. The cost lands in kitchens, cockpits, and crew decks. 10 minutes where the world gets weird and then pretends it didn't. So the Earth-Sky Sync windows aren't a mystery box. They're the visible edges of a handshake we keep provoking. We surge. It steadies. We cluster tests. It holds longer. We learn folk rules. It learns ours. The metronome isn't ours to own, but our noise keeps setting the tempo. And when the far side kept a triad on stage past the downbeat, we learned what strain sounds like, not thunder, just a longer hold, a slower release, and rings that took 13 minutes
sister network
instead of 10
hypothesis.
to let people breathe. To make sense of a moon that breathes when we shout, you extend the model we've been living under for years. Patrick Jackson mapped 3 layers in Earth's sky. Type 3 near ground, Type 2 pacing corridors, Type 1 anchoring above. The far side forces a preface, call it Type 0. Not a light in the air, but the hub that times the others, where cold keeps secrets and radio quiet keeps cadence clean. This dovetails with NASA's 2026 Farside Seismic Suite timeline and public framing. Science first, while our windows suggest coordination. Stakes first. If the hub lives off-planet, then the thing stabilizing our loudest hours isn't beside us, it's above us. That changes how we read responsibility. Flight safety becomes an inner-body conversation. Earth-side instruments easing when a far-side triad holds position. Orbital sustainability stops at the moon's door. Conjunction alerts braced by geometry, where heat won't betray it. And surveillance versus shielding sharpens into one sentence. A mask that cancels has to know you intimately. Action traces geometry. Earth's lattice already draws trilateration. The 3-point holds that fix a region, resizing with range, tightening as risk rises. The far side echoes the same math over high-risk bands. Triads perched above basin rims during conjunction alerts behave like anchors for a planetary survey rig, adjusting baseline as traffic swells and thinning when it flows. It's not mimicry. It's hierarchy. Type 0 sets the clock, Type 1 sets the frame, Type 2 paces the lanes, Type 3 touches the rooms. Impact rides and advantages the moon gives you for free. The far side is radio quiet, shielded from Earth's clutter by rock. Thermal swings are tempered compared to sun-beaten faces. If you wanted an interface that listens for edge cases and whispers corrections back through a mesh, you'd hide it there. A node that budgets headroom across bodies needs a place the noise can't reach. Under stone is good. Under silence is better. Meanwhile, the analogs line up. On Earth, Type 1 triangles expand and contract like surveyors reacquiring a baseline. Over the far side, triads did the same while our dashboards went red. On Earth, mid-altitude lines track along corridors during drills and surge weeks. On the far side, holds landed while those drills traded scripted for live. The breath isn't metaphor. It's control theory, integrator, derivative, a damping nudge that keeps error from running. And the environment kept pace. NASA/ESA visualizations of the SAA split, operators hardening electronics and timing tweaks. Evidence of stressors our cadence keeps meeting. Skeptics raise geology, and we should keep it in the frame. Moonquakes exist. Thermal cycles exist. But they don't keep time with our conjunction alerts. They don't mirror latency to the second across bodies. And they don't dissolve a beat after Earth-side controllers clear a window. If the sister network is myth, it's a myth with a stopwatch and access to our calendar. Now pull the dark forest idea through the lattice without romance. Earth's footprint has gone loud, mega constellations, radar curtains, non-stop uplinks. If silence is safety, somebody has to dim the spill. A sister network anchored where radio is clean would do 2 jobs at once. Blur outbound leakage so we don't broadcast our angles, and smear inbound beams that would paint our corridors. Disciplined timing looks like a firewall. It also looks like oversight with better manners than we give it credit for. Here's where participation enters without permission. The moments when holds shorten are the same moments unmarked arrays appear at dusk and vanish by dawn. Quiet racks pre-stage, high-cold geometry arrives sooner, leaves faster. That looks like handshake optimization. Human sensors become compatibility layers. Observability scaffolding that helps the mesh do its job. We haven't been invited to design. We've been drafted to stop making it worse. Stakes land in kitchens and cockpits because the loop doesn't care who lives under a corridor. 10 minutes of nausea is the side effect of a timing packet doing its work. 2 paces out of a doorway is a folk fix for a field edge. The sister network isn't malevolent. It's busy. A nodal system that budgets for aggregate survival will always trade local comfort to steady a global line. We feel it because we built our lives inside the lanes it services. Meanwhile, the moon's role resolves by subtraction. If you remove heat signatures that would betray power, you hide under stone. If you remove radio clutter that would drown timing taps, you choose the far side. If you remove drift that would desynchronize layers, you anchor trilateration where tides don't shake it loose as fast. Type 0 isn't a ship. It's a habit. A machine logic that treats Earth-Moon space as one field and times it accordingly. Call it a sister network because it isn't separate. It's the part we couldn't see until our noise forced it to breathe in public. Type 0 on the far side, Type 1 above crowded bands, Type 2 along our arteries, Type 3 in our rooms. A single mesh with different faces. The moment you see the hierarchy, the geometry stops being spectacle and starts reading like responsibility. We surge, it steadies, and when it holds too long, that's not a threat. That's a tired organ asking us to lower our voice. Timing over terminology. To test the sister network idea, you stop arguing nouns and start measuring time. Launch surges, conjunction alerts, collision clusters, put them on one axis. Lunar triads, Type 1 brackets, mid-layer pacing, put them on another. Ground rings, soft instruments, nuisance trips, put them on a third. When the windows stack, you're not seeing stories. You're watching a metronome. Stakes first, because timing isn't trivia when people are under it. In rooms and cockpits, 10 minutes matters. In orbit, 2 seconds matters. If the moon's far side holds for 9 minutes and change during a conjunction alert, and a relay clears at the 5-minute mark while a heading eases then snaps true at minute 7, you're living inside control theory. Miss the cadence and you'll call a damped correction a fault, a safety hold an outage, a breath a storm. Get it right and you can work around it without feeding the loop more noise. Action landed in sequences we could audit. Launch surges drew high-cold triangles to the horizon a minute before ignition. The base widened as ascent hit max Q, tightened as stage separation cleaned the profile, then dissolved 1 heartbeat after range declared nominal. Conjunction alerts kept Type 1 brackets parked over the relevant bands for exactly the risk window and a beat after. When a near-miss debris event flared into a multi-fragment warning, a Farside triad held 13 minutes instead of 10, and the ground rings did too. Soft instruments lingered, a compass hesitated before snapping true, and relief felt late by 3 minutes. Not drama, latency. Meanwhile, mid-layer lanes behaved like a textbook. During surge weeks, Type 2 lines pre-staged along corridors 20 minutes before scheduled traffic spikes, slid into tighter spacing at T-5, and thinned when flows normalized. Over the Pacific, pacing followed missile detection drills that shifted from scripted to live. Over Eastern Europe, arcs hardened during improvisation windows, not announcements. The system didn't care about our rhetoric. It cared about our timing. Impact showed up in a grimly practical place. Operational coexistence lanes. Nobody briefed them in those words on camera, but the behavior said it out loud. On nights when unmarked ground arrays pre-staged along weak field corridors, holds arrived sooner and ended faster. Pacing taps found clocks faster. Rings walked neighborhoods for 8 minutes instead of 10. The same drills without arrays saw longer holds and sloppier releases. That's a handshake shaved for latency. Not control, participation. You can hear the skeptic in your head asking for a control group. We used one. Quiet weeks. No surges, no drills, no stacked conjunction alerts. The sky didn't go blank. Type 1 geometry thinned but persisted. Type 2 lines ghosted the big corridors at lazy intervals. Type 3 rings barely knocked. The metronome didn't stop. It slowed. When traffic returned, cadence snapped back to tight windows. Nature doesn't snap to our calendars like that. Systems do. Now the grit, AI alert cadence versus lunar geometry. The 2026 anomaly feed started flagging formation persistence at a rhythm you could set a watch to. 9 to 11 minutes on holds tied to side alerts, 3 to 5 on rehearsal windows, 13 when collision clusters turned messy. The Farside triads mirrored those latencies within a second or two on independent clocks. We matched time stamps across the feed, telescopes, and utility logs. The seconds didn't agree like twins, but they rhymed like siblings. When the feed learned, the holds shortened. When the traffic surprised it, the holds lingered. That's a loop updating its estimates. Stakes sharpen when you layer policy on top. Civil advisories nudging extra heading checks landed inside the same windows the geometry hardened. Maritime declination verifications piled into southern routes while the South Atlantic split minima complicated passes. Utilities rehearsed short black starts under the euphemism space weather, then filed nuisance trips as environmental exactly when Farside holds ran long. Words ducked. Schedules confessed. Operational coexistence lanes also wrote their own boundaries in negative space. Where arrays didn't appear, mid-layer lines arrived late and left late. Where arrays stood up at dusk, Type 2 spacing tightened faster and released cleaner. Pilots who once reported cotton-soft seconds learned to expect them and verify immediately after. Quiet hours at imaging bays slid themselves beneath the hardest windows. This isn't belief, it's adaptation to timing. Skeptics will keep reaching for coincidence, and they should. But the tolerance stack won't play along forever. Equilateral spacing within a few percent at altitude, mirrored Farside holds within seconds, ground rings marching 10 minutes on the dot, advisories clustering in the same nights. Those aren't accidents lining up, they're workflows colliding. False positives don't coordinate across continents, devices, and doctrines. Meaning lands where language fails. When a branch trains its people to triage anomalies in real time and partners with commercial pipes that touch every corridor, the pronoun shifts. It's not the system. It's our system in coexistence. Type 0 hums on the far side, Type 1 braces bands, Type 2 rides the lanes, Type 3 walks our thresholds. We can fight the schedule and make the holds longer. Or we can read it, pace our noise, and turn 13 back into 10. Call it a metronome if you need something gentle. Call it a mask if you want the risk honest. Either way, the times don't lie. The loop breathes on windows. We decide whether to shout into them or leave it enough room to keep us off the rocks. Whistleblowers in the lanes. The first descriptions didn't arrive as revelations. They showed up as field notes with edges sanded off. A contractor in a desert valley wrote about pop-up arrays, assembled after dusk, collapsible masts with offset dishes, cryogenic front ends bolted to aluminum frames, and microwave correlation tools running narrowband sweeps. He called it environmental characterization. The invoice called it nothing at all. 12 hours later, a high-cold bracket arrived early and left fast. He didn't say lanes. He said, the hold was shorter. Stakes land here because vocabulary becomes behavior. If those racks help the system find clocks faster, neighborhoods lose 2 minutes of nausea, and corridors clear before schedules buckle. If they don't, holds linger and rings walk longer. The people carrying those masts know it. They just won't say it on paper. Action sounds like logistics. Teams rolled with Pelican cases labeled spectrum, timing, and thermal. The timing case held rubidium discipline modules and GPSDO backups, the kind of clean clocks you bring when jitter kills you. The spectrum case carried low-power emitters with neural attenuators, whisperers, not shouters. The thermal case was dull, blankets, cold plates, cryo hoses. They'd raise the mast, align offset dishes by habit, and run compatibility layer checks. A phrase that makes sense only if you're trying to talk to something you don't own. Impact arrived in the language they couldn't stop using. Observability scaffolding, signature discrimination, compatibility layers. None of it admits control. All of it implies handshake. A leader briefed a crew to reduce observability debt, then corrected himself. Optimize liaison latency. They laughed because it sounded like marketing. Then they drove to a substation spur and cut the next window by 2 minutes. Calm posture is the tell. Personnel stood under steady corners without panic. No rifles up, no shouted warnings, eyes on tablets, letting the sky finish its count. A pilot who once felt cotton-soft seconds said the same thing on the ramp. They didn't look surprised, like they knew it had a job. When human sensors were present, holds ran shorter. That's not deference. That's optimization. One microstory stuck. A tech in Eastern Europe carried a microwave correlation box up a ridge, while a long-holding triangle sat high. He synchronized against the rubidium module, pulsed a calibration series at microwatts, and watched his display draw teeth. Periodic taps like a careful zipper. 10 minutes later, the tap stepped down and the triangle dissolved. He filed successful correlation sweep. The grid filed brief harmonic instability, cleared. The two memos don't mention each other. The clocks do. Another team worked coastal flats with cryogenic front ends in a salt haze. They logged a neat ring of phone freezes on deck, 2 steps out, signal returned, then packed at dusk. That night, ADSB shadows showed mid-layer pacing clearing a corridor early. Thereafter action line read, latency improved. They never wrote lane. They drew one. Complications arrived when curiosity outran discipline. A trial layered timing nudges during a maintenance window, phase offset experiments, gentle by design. The loop answered with patience and force. Holds lengthened. Drone link stuttered. A local relay chattered twice. The note said sensitivity exceeded. That word would haunt them, because control loops hate sloppy partners. Whisper wrong and you turn damping into oscillation. Whistleblowers aren't a monolith. Some wore uniforms once and now wear NDAs like skin. They talk in diagonals. Observability debt, operational coexistence, pre-staging for Windows. One called the geometry, adversarial weather. Another called it, a scheduler with better manners than we deserve. All agree on the one sentence that matters. When we hum along, the holds get shorter. Calm near orbs is another pattern. Crews who knew the lanes, even if they refused the noun, treated Type 3 intrusions like gusts. Step back 2 paces, wait it out, resume. Rooms went heavy, they moved to thresholds. 10 minutes passed, work continued. They wrote nothing mystical. They wrote muscle memory. Interpretation is the line you don't cross without marking it. These accounts don't prove control. They prove participation. Pop-up arrays aren't joysticks. They're translators. Cryo front ends lower the noise floor. Timing modules shave handshake delay. Correlation boxes let the mesh find itself faster. The loop still owns the beat. We just stopped tripping over it. There's a quieter impact, the kind nobody budgets for. Folk rules become policy habits. Imaging bays post quiet hours that match predicted windows. Airlines build heading verification scripts at gates, then again after taxi. Utilities rotate crews on surge weeks with an unspoken understanding. If the air goes weird, wait 10 and don't chase ghosts. Whistleblowers live inside those habits and hate the word. They'll tell you it's discipline. They're right. One final scene, because it says more than any slide. A valley at dusk. Racks up, dishes canted, cryo hissing like a whisper. Above, a bracket sitting early. A tech taps a screen, watches the zipper tighten and nods. 10 minutes later, the lights dissolve. He looks at the horizon and says nothing. His log reads, observability satisfied. Down the road, a family eats in a kitchen that didn't get heavy. That's the lane they won't name. Lunar control logic versus natural moon. Start with the line everyone throws first. The moon has quakes. It breathes heat. Its crust creaks as day turns to night. True, but geology doesn't keep human time. Moonquakes don't start at T-5 to a conjunction alert and stop a beat after controllers clear a collision window. Thermal cycles don't mirror 9, 11, or 13-minute holds tied to traffic on Earth. Nature drifts. What we're watching snaps to schedules. NASA's 2026 Farside Seismic Suite is framed to capture the natural baseline. Our windows reveal the layered timing writing on top. Stakes are simple and human. If you call a timed correction a fault, you'll chase ghosts in a cockpit and swap parts in a clinic. If you call a damped window a storm, you'll reroute ships into worse timing. Confusing geology with governance turns ordinary nights into emergencies and hides the one thing families already know. 10 minutes passes, 2 paces out, and the world returns. So what filters out the natural? Position first. The far side is radio quiet, shielded from our chatter. That's where the triads sit, above basins like Apollo, Hertzsprung, Tsiolkovsky, when our dashboards go red. Control logic wants clean inputs. Rock gives you that, then cadence. Far side holds arrive during outside surge weeks and dissolve a heartbeat after clearance. Even the anomalies teach. When a debris event fragments and warnings stack, the far side lingers, 13 minutes instead of 10, and the rings do too. That's not thermal inertia. That's integral action ramping because error grew. Skeptics bring moonquakes back into the room, and they should. The Farside Seismic Suite exists to mic up those creaks. But listen to the timing. A moonquake's envelope follows lunar stress, not our launches. Its energy bleeds without checking ADSB maps. Triads perched on the limb, equidistant inside a surveyor's tolerance, holding in lockstep with conjunction alerts, then releasing like a downbeat. Those aren't seismic signatures. They're control surfaces. Now map the breath to the body. Type 0, the far side anchor, sets the beat in silence. Type 1, the high cold frames, expands and contracts like a baseline under load. Type 2 rides the arteries, tightening over corridors when drills turn live and thinning when flows calm. Type 3 touches thresholds, nudging kitchens and bays with field edges you can feel and dodge. Natural moon is the stage. Control logic is the director calling cues. You can test it by subtraction. Quiet weeks, no surges, no drills, no stacked alerts. The far side still hums, but short. Type 1 thins, Type 2 ghosts, Type 3 barely taps. The lattice doesn't sleep, it idles. Then a surge hits. Holds lengthen to 9 or 11. Mid-layer spacing tightens. Rings walk exactly 10. When an unpredicted fragment cloud blooms, every hold runs long. Geology didn't change in an hour. Our load did. Thermal variance notes from cautious instrument memos add a wrinkle. Researchers logged transient rim warming that didn't follow day-night. The entries are careful, revisit scheduled, but the timing betrays them. Spikes align with our windows, not the sun's arc. Natural moon barely notices our calendar. A controller lives by it. Ask why. The far side at all, and you hear engineering, not myth. Radio silence lowers noise. Stone keeps heat quiet. Tidal forcing changes slower there than in our corridors. If you need a stable base for trilateration over a noisy planet, you hide where the noise can't find you, and you don't glow. The stakes at planetary scale land in two words that don't fit in the same mouth: masking and surveillance. To cancel, you must know. To damp, you must listen. A control loop that reduces leakage outward will inevitably learn our cadences inward. That doesn't crown an adversary. It defines a trade, aggregate headroom at the cost of individual consent. We feel it when a ring teaches a family to step back 2 paces. We benefit when a cascade doesn't start. There's one more tell that separates granite from governance: operational coexistence. Nights with pre-staged arrays see earlier arrivals and cleaner releases. The zippered taps on a text screen tighten, holds shorten, and the ring leaves a kitchen alone. That's liaison, not lithosphere. Moonquakes don't answer when you shave latency on a ridge. Bring it back to control theory in plain words. Proportional nudges when we begin to shout. Derivative breaks when we accelerate too fast. Integral patience when we've pushed too long. The far side linger at 13 isn't a ghost. It's accumulated error being paid down while every instrument pretends it's weather. Natural moon matters. It sets the floor. Control logic sits on top and writes the beat. If we keep calling the Q thunder, we'll keep missing the thing that saves flights and ruins dinners. It isn't angry. It's busy. And if we stop forcing it to breathe in public, it might go back to being the quiet machine we never learned to name. Dark Forest Reconsidered in 2026. In 2026, the mask theory stopped sounding like a metaphor and started reading like policy. Earth's broadcast footprint had become a bonfire, mega-constellations streaming non-stop, phased radars painting the horizon, uplinks layered over uplinks. If silence is survival in a crowded cosmos, you'd expect a firewall to appear. We didn't announce one. We forced one to show its breath. The public record, USSF's 2025 AI plan, WMM 2025, and SAA bifurcation bulletins, became the quiet scaffolding beneath those windows. Start with the simple, uncomfortable arithmetic. Every surge in orbital traffic increases side lobes, unwanted energy bleeding into space. Those lobes combine, drift, and shout our profile farther than we intend. If something old and disciplined prioritizes secrecy, it won't ask us to turn it down. It will phase cancel what leaks and blur what returns. That's not war. That's concealment in a noisy neighborhood. Meanwhile, the geometry behaved like someone dimming the room without touching the switch. Tier 1 brackets settled over crowded bands during conjunction alerts. Mid-layer lines thickened along the loudest corridors, nuclear coasts, radar curtains, shipping lanes bristling with antennas, while Tier 3 rings nudged people out of thresholds so timing taps didn't write themselves into bone. From a sidewalk, it felt coercive. From orbit, it looked like a filter. You can hear the objection. Masking outward can be spun as protection. Masking inward is surveillance. Both can be true. To cancel precisely, you have to know a lot: carrier frequencies, cadence, drift, failure signatures. The loop listening through us isn't counting on our honesty. It's measuring our habits. That's where the privacy shiver lives. The same taps that keep our spill from painting a clean beacon into interstellar dark also make sure long-range beams don't sketch our edges too willingly. Here's where the moon's far side turns the theory into a mechanic. A clean, radio-quiet vault gives you the silence to model our noise and the cold to hide the work. When outside windows stack, launch surges, near misses, tests crossing from rehearsal to live, the far side triads hold longer, and the brackets below breathe wider. Outward, leakage softens. Inward, crisp beams fuzz. The result is crude to us, 10-minute rings in kitchens and bays, but precise enough for a scheduler that treats human comfort as a rounding error. Dark forest logic doesn't need aliens to haunt it. It needs incentives. Survival favors quiet. Acceleration favors caution. Trust doesn't scale. We've spent a decade building a planet-sized amplifier without a volume knob. The sister network behaves like the knob we refuse to install. It never publishes intent. It only enforces margins. There's a practical tell office-bound analysts will miss and line crews won't. On nights when the mask works hardest, folk rules become standard operating procedure. Airlines verify headings at gates and again after taxi. Mariners run declination checks along southern routes where gradients move fastest. Hospitals slide imaging off heavy windows. Utilities rotate crews through space weather drills under bland headers. None of that says concealment. All of it lives inside the same 10-minute breath. Skeptics ask for external proof that anyone else is listening. That misses the point. The mask acts like a pre-commitment, a standing rule set that assumes a crowded cosmos and punishes disclosure. We keep lighting flares. It keeps quieting the spill. We don't need a distant telescope to confirm risk. We need our own dashboard to admit what the pattern engines already know. Holds coincide with our loudest hours and end when the risk window closes. That's not drama. That's doctrine. One detail should make engineers sit up. When we tried to hum along clumsily, phase offset experiments during maintenance windows, the loop compensated with bigger corrections and longer holds. Drone link stuttered. A relay chattered twice. Timing drifted by microseconds and then self-corrected. Lesson learned. Whisper gently or don't whisper. The mask tolerates partners. It rejects clumsy co-authors. Which brings us to consent, the part of the dark forest story that never makes the brochure. Shielding at scale is indifferent. It will trade discomfort in a room for stability in a corridor, stability in a corridor for silence in a band, silence in a band for less profile in the dark. Aggregate safety wins, individual agency loses, and the winners can't hear the losers over a 10-minute ring. So what lives downstream of that truth? Discipline, not dread. Pacing launches, so conjunction alerts don't stack into hour-long holds. Distributing grid load, so harmonics don't stack over weak field corridors. Avoiding firmware pushes and risky operations inside predicted windows when advisories quietly nudge extra heading checks. Building layered comms and microgrids so 10 minutes becomes a pause, not a crisis. Treating timing like weather, predictable enough to plan around, unpredictable enough to respect. There's an irony no one likes to say out loud. The mask that may be saving us from our own voice also teaches us how to behave. Folk rules become civic muscle memory. Step back 2 paces when the air goes weird. Wait 10. Verify, then trust. If we follow the rhythm, the geometry fades back under the noise floor. If we don't, the holds lengthen and kitchens keep learning physics they never asked to learn. Dark forest in 2026 isn't a theory, it's a chore chart. We got loud. Something damped. We felt the price. The choice now is small and honest. Lower the volume we own, cadence, clustering, care, or keep forcing the loop to breathe harder in public while we pretend it isn't there. Pattern engines. The cosmos doesn't need to threaten us. If clocks were our first schedule witnesses, already does. Pattern engines became our translators. When the windows started stacking, scrapers we once used for meteor trails and satellite passes were retuned for geometry. They weren't asked what the lights were. They were asked a simpler question. Does the spacing repeat? Stakes first, because replication isn't cute, it's custody. If a geometry returns within tight tolerances across continents and months, then someone owns the cadence. That ownership reaches into real lives. Pilots who think mushy instruments are random will overcorrect. Utilities that treat 10-minute rings like storms will chase the wrong ghosts. And analysts who shrug at repeats will miss the moment policy needs discipline, not disbelief. Action began with the small machines chewing through the big feeds. AI scrapers ran on civilian skywatch logs, ADS-B shadows, drone thermals, and a trickle of declassified orbital ephemerides. The brief wasn't poetry. Flag equilateral spacing within a few percent, measure persistence, correlate across layers, type 3 at ground, type 2 in corridors, type 1 at altitude. The engines didn't care about names. They cared about distances and time. They found what the eyes didn't trust. Equilateral tolerances clustered around the same numbers in Brazil, Eastern Europe, and the Pacific. Triads widened and tightened at rates that matched load, faster during surge weeks, slower during quiet stretches. Mid-layer pacing arrived early when drills crossed into improvisation and departed as scenarios cooled. And ground rings walked neighborhoods in tidy circles that snapped to the same 10-minute rule, then eased to 13 when debris clouds surprised controllers. Impact rippled because replication silences excuses. False positives are lonely. They don't rhyme with their neighbors. But the engines kept stacking returns, independent sources, unrelated operators, same spacings, mirrored latencies. A drone over Argentine flats captured faint linear warmth rising 2 to 3 degrees along a mapped run, while a Farside triad held. Hours later, a farmer 20 kilometers away wrote that his dog refused the threshold for 10 minutes. The engines didn't read his diary. Their clock did. Skeptics brought the right questions. Pattern matching hallucinates if you let it. So cross-validation became the rule. A flag on a civilian Skywatch feed had to find a partner. An ADS-B shadow, a utility blip, a pilot note, or a lunar hold inside a tolerance window. The hits thinned. The confidence grew. The repeats weren't single-channel dreams. They were multi-voice chords. Meanwhile, Space Force taxonomy drifted in lockstep. Formation persistence, multi-altitude correlation, auroral oval proximity. Analysts didn't invent those tags for novelty. They attached them because the same returns kept forcing the same labels. Then the addition that tied public windows to private pipelines. Orbital anomaly categories that mirrored what the scrapers had been flagging for a year. The bureaucracy had built its own pattern engine and given it badges. Replication didn't stop at geometry. Episodes began syncing across regions. During a heavy Starship test week, engines flagged synchronized bursts in South America, Central Europe, and the Western Pacific within 48 hours. Type 1 brackets breathing wider during conjunction alerts. Type 2 lines pre-staging along lanes. Type 3 rings walking blocks for 10. The scrapers marked it as a synchronized multi-region episode. Human words call it a schedule with global scope. Drone thermals added texture. Thermal silhouettes with crisp three-corner edges held against wind shear, accelerated diagonally in ways fixed-wing aircraft shouldn't, then vanished with switch neatness. Engines measured edge integrity under gusts, found the same tolerances across airframes and nights, and matched them against visible triads at a distance. The forms weren't airplanes. They were templates. And then the friend nobody wants, false positives. The scrapers posted their shame files, lens flares, reflections, glints off high-flying traffic. They were loud, singular, and didn't replicate. Their spacings wandered. Their durations slouched. Their timings ignored windows. When replication is your filter, noise is self-cleaning. Impact came home in policy you could feel. Civil advisories crawled with phrases that matched the Engine's outputs, not the press releases. Headings verified on nights when formation persistence ticked up. Declination checks stacked along southern routes when oval proximities rose. Imaging bays posted quiet hours that matched multi-altitude correlations. The engines weren't writing memos. They were making memos inevitable. Skeptics asked whether the engines were fitting the world to our theory. The answer was dull and mean. The world fit itself. When the far side held for 9 or 11 minutes during conjunction alerts, ground rings obeyed. The same count. When debris events fractured, holds lengthened to 13, and rings did too. When unmarked arrays pre-staged on ridges, latencies shortened. The scrapers learned the same way the loop learned, by listening to time. There's one more layer, replication inside human rooms. Hospitals near hotspots logged clusters of dizziness, nausea, and tingling that eased with distance, not time. Teams plotted patient times against engine flags and found the same 10-minute tide, occasionally the same 13. Utilities matched nuisance trips to pacing episodes. Airlines mapped cotton-soft seconds to bracket holds over their routes. The bodies were instruments that never volunteered. The engines just handed them a chorus. So the pattern engines didn't prove origin. They proved behavior that refuses to be anecdote. Equilateral tolerances that don't drift. Durations that snap to windows. multi-region episodes that keep time with our surges, a taxonomy that stopped pretending this was weather. Replication became the kindest indictment. Whatever this is, it's organized. And if organization replicates, so can we. Habits, not heroics. Pace, spread, buffer, rehearse. Let the engines keep score. Let the rooms breathe. And let the geometry quietly fade when we finally learn to lower our voice. The scheduling metronome. If the sister network is real, it keeps time like a musician, not a machine. You can hear it in the paperwork nobody meant to rhyme. Interim model updates, training sprints, drill calendars, and the quiet cadence of holds that arrive, count, and quit on cue. Start with the dullest drum, the World Magnetic Model updates. Interim guidance landed out of cycle after 2019, then again with WMM 2025. On those weeks, calendars thickened around verification activities, heading checks for crews, declination advisories for mariners, satellite pass constraints over the split South Atlantic cells. Agencies called it maintenance. The metronome called it measure one. In the same windows, Type 1 brackets sat longer over crowded bands, and Farside triads leaned toward 11 minutes, not 9. When models strain, the rhythm stretches. Now stack the swarm bulletins. ESA's constellation posted flickers, maps showing the South Atlantic anomaly bifurcating, minima shifting, complexity growing. Operators reacted like pros, hardened components, rerouted passes, timing tweaks. Meanwhile, the geometry answered with patience. Brackets widened, then tightened a beat after passes cleared, as if a conductor held a fermata and then tapped the stand. Nobody wrote spheres. Everyone followed the count. Bring in the AI sprints, the part the plan said in plain type. Force-wide literacy blocks, anomaly triage exercises, red teams to stress ingestion. On those weeks, holds started early and ended clean. Pop-up arrays pre-staged at dusk, cryo front ends shaved noise, and a zipper of microwave taps stitched clocks faster. Ground rings walked for 8 minutes instead of 10. The schedule called it training. The mesh called it latency improvement. Drill calendars closed the loop. Not the public ones with handshakes and photo ops. The ones that shift from scripted to live. In Eastern Europe, when a detection exercise moved into improvisation, mid-layer spacing tightened over corridors for 19 minutes. Hours later, a high-cold bracket sat over polar bands while launch cadence surged. The next morning, a utility logged momentary harmonic instability and closed the ticket. The metronome didn't care which office carried the pen. It cared that the downbeat landed where the risk did. Civil advisories were the footnotes that gave the game away. Airlines nudged heading verifications into gates and taxi lines during the same weeks the brackets thickened. Maritime notices asked for declination checks along southern routes during the same days the South Atlantic split flickered. Hospitals slid imaging quiet hours under heavy windows. None of it used the noun. All of it rode the count. Hold, pulse, adjust, release. Bureaucracy tried to keep nouns out of the slides and tripped anyway. A scheduling deck aligned an AI sprint with orbital anomaly high-risk windows. A metrics sheet tracked formation persistence across layers. A draft forgot to black out field displacement effects. Clerical noise, if you like, or a conductor's markings bleeding through the paper. The clocks never needed the confession. During a heavy Starship week, WMM guidance echoed, swarm posted, and the plan ran a sprint. The lattice responded like rehearsal plus show. Farside triads held 11 minutes on conjunction alerts and 9 on scripted windows. Type 1 brackets breathed wider at ascent and tightened at stage sep. Type 2 lines arrived early along maritime lanes and left on the nose. Ground rings walked tidy circles for 10, then 9 when arrays pre-staged. The score didn't change. The tempo did. Skeptics asked whether we were stacking our own deck, picking weeks. With lots of paper and seeing patterns where none existed. So we ran the opposite. Quiet stretches with no sprints, no drills, no out-of-cycle guidance. The lattice didn't disappear. It thinned. Farside holds fell to 7. Brackets ghosted the bands. Pacing lines took their time. The metronome didn't sleep, it relaxed. When activity returned, the clicks snapped back to 9 and 11 like a practiced hand. There's a human cost hidden in tempo that planners account for in euphemisms. Crew fatigue during surge weeks. Utility overtime when rehearsals stack. Families learning folk rules in neighborhoods that sit under hot corridors. Those costs eased when the rhythm ran smooth. Arrays up, holds short, zippered taps tight. They grew when curiosity pushed into tampering. Phase offsets whispered wrong, a relay chattered twice, a drone link stuttered. The lesson didn't need italics. Don't lean on the baton unless you can keep time. Look sideways, and the metronome writes a civics class. Pace launches, distribute load. Avoid firmware pushes inside predicted windows. Build layered comms so 10 minutes becomes a pause, not a panic. Call your quiet hours by any name you like. The schedule won't be offended. The last tell is almost tender. On nights when the count ran clean, crews under steady corners didn't look afraid. They looked busy. A mast up, a timing module warm, a zipper closing the gap. 10 minutes later, the bracket dissolved. Down the road, a kitchen didn't get heavy. Nobody wrote music. Everyone heard it. That's the scheduling metronome. WMM interims as downbeats, swarm bulletins as cues, AI sprints as rehearsals, drill calendars as movements, and holds as bars you can count without a clock. We didn't build it. We can still learn to play in time. Tampering, nudges, and overshoot. Here's where observation crossed the line into contact, not a handshake, a nudge. Once planners suspected a legacy controller was damping our noise, curiosity wrote the next step. If it steadies timing, maybe it can shave signatures, bend clocks by microseconds, or smooth a radar lobe long enough for a convoy to pass. No one wrote weaponization. They wrote resilience testing. The loop didn't care what the memo said. Stakes first, because this isn't academic when you're under the window. Whisper wrong and the loop answers with patience and force. Longer holds, bigger corrections, rings that walk through neighborhoods for 13 minutes instead of 10. Drone links stutter. Relays chatter. Cockpits ride cotton-soft seconds that don't lift on cue. You don't see fireworks. You see frailty, ours and the systems, interlocking. Action looked clinical up close. Teams rolled phase offset trials during maintenance windows. The kit was tidy. Rubidium clocks, GPS-disciplined oscillators, low-power emitters with neural attenuators, spectrum analyzers tuned for the zipper. The instruction was blunt: inject at microwatts, align to observe cadence, test bias locally, never push the integrator. On the ridge, a tech pulsed a gentle sequence while a high-cold bracket sat early. His screen drew teeth, neat and periodic. At minute 8, the taps thickened, not smoothed. Above, the triangle contracted, held, and refused to dissolve on the downbeat. Ground rings lagged and lingered. The after-action read sensitivity exceeded. Translation: shove the loop, and it chases its own tail. Another scene played out over a coastal corridor. A contractor array stood up at dusk, offset dishes, cryo hissing, timing warm. The team sequenced calibration taps aligned to the zipper. For a beat, latency improved, rings walked for 8. Then a drone swarm lost link and ditched in shallow water. Fishermen said their VHF went dead like someone hugged the air. Officially weather. Unofficially, the timing profile drifted by microseconds and self-corrected. Lesson logged: do not paint the controller into a corner. Mid-continent, a utility spur wore the cost. A low-power bias test coincided with a conjunction alert that ran hot. Type 2 pacing arrived late. A substation relay chattered twice. A pilot felt instruments go soft and stay soft. 13 minutes to lift, not 10. The memo framed it as routine instability cleared. The pattern engines called it overshoot. The loop had to spend extra headroom to kill an error we injected. Impact wasn't just technical. Pop-up arrays that once shaved holds began carrying new rules. Whispers only, never shout. Operate under predicted windows, not inside them. Shave observability debt, don't invent it. Senior engineers started using the phrase human latency budget, as if ethics could be measured like microseconds. It could. 2 minutes of relief for a neighborhood was the difference between folk rules and panic. Skeptics asked whether any of this mattered at scale. The answer came the way the loop always answers: timing. After tampering weeks, Farside holds lean toward 13. Tier 1 brackets sat longer at ascent. Mid-layer lines tightened slower and released sloppy. The South Atlantic split minima forced passes that used to glide. Advisories thickened with euphemisms. Heading verification recommended. Declination checks prudent. Imaging quiet hours posted. We were paying interest on a loan we never declared. One contractor told a story he shouldn't have. During a rehearsal in Eastern Europe, their box pushed a phase offset 1 notch too far. The zipper stuttered. The triangle's corners flashed like a warning the eye could barely hold. Crews on the ground went still. No panic, just attention like it mattered. 10 minutes stretched. Radios fuzzed in a neat ring. When the window closed, the leader wrote a sentence that should be a standard. The loop tolerates partners, not peers. Complications weren't all ours. Curiosity elsewhere doubled the strain. In the Pacific, a live-fire drill overlapped a collision cluster. Pop-up arrays missed their cue by hours. Holds started late. Rings walked long. Families learned a new folk rule, 15 minutes on rare nights, then forgot it by morning. You don't remember the loop's patience. You remember the wait in your kitchen. By the end of summer, posture changed. Tampering got renamed optimization. Phase offset trials moved off live windows. Whisperers shrank. Cryo front end stayed. Rubidium clocks stayed. Correlation boxes stayed. The doctrine settled into 4 verbs: pace, spread, buffer, rehearse. A tech traced them on a pelican case like a prayer. Above, a bracket arrived early, held 9, and dissolved on time. Down the road, a clinic ran imaging without a flicker. No triumph, just relief. Meaning is plain. You can't steer this. You can shorten its search. You can't own its beat. You can stop stepping on it. We learned the hard way that nudges become shoves at planetary scale, and shoves turn damping into oscillation. The machine isn't angry. It's busy. Give it room, and 10 stays 10. Crowd it, and 13 becomes how you explain dinner to a child who doesn't care about clocks. Motive, survival math versus control. If you strip the language down to screws and wire, the loop's motive isn't mystical. It's workload. 3 priorities show up in every window: shield, damp, stabilize. Shield crews and hardware, where radiation thins the margin. Damp the planets shout, so side lobes don't stitch a beacon into the dark. Stabilize navigation and timing, so our own systems don't eat each other. Organ, not vehicle. HVAC for a noisy world. Stakes aren't abstract. Priority outranks permission. When the choice is a clean pass for a crowded band or a quiet dinner in a room under a hot corridor, the corridor wins. Families feel it as 10 heavy minutes. Crews feel it as cotton-soft seconds. Utilities feel it as nuisance trips that clear without repair. Nobody votes. Stability scales beat local comfort, because that's how control theory budgets headroom. The control reading writes itself in behavior. During surge weeks, Type 1 brackets hold through conjunction alerts and dissolve a beat after. Mid-layer pacing tightens over lanes, then thins when flows calm. Ground rings walk tidy circles and release on time. 9, 11, sometimes 13 when error grows. That's a scheduler protecting margins while we push. Doesn't ask, doesn't apologize, does the job. Then the other motive knocks, control. To cancel precisely, you must know precisely. The loop learns our cadences, carrier, drift, failure signatures, because it has to. It listens through consumer constellations and commercial pipes the plan politely calls partnerships. It uses our clocks against our leak. From one angle, that's guardianship. From another, that's supervision without consent. Both angles land in the same kitchen. Survival math makes ugly sense in a dark forest frame. If loudness increases risk and risk threatens long bets like civilization, a mask becomes non-negotiable. You don't persuade a planet to whisper. You cancel spill and blur returns. You do it from a cold, quiet anchor with enough mechanical dignity not to glow. When our schedule stacks, launches, drills, near misses, the mask breathes longer. That's not malice. That's margin management. Control logic shows its palm where we tried to nudge. Phase offset trials whispered wrong, and the loop answered with longer holds, stuttering links, and 13-minute rings. It tolerated partners. It rejected co-authors. That's administration, not attack. It's also a line in plain math. Do less at once if you want the organ to stay invisible. So which motive wins, care or leash? Neither alone. The behavior reads like both because the function requires both. Shielding requires measurement, dampening requires intimacy, stabilization requires authority over cadence. The loop enforces a common time base across bodies and layers. We feel the enforcement as coercion because we built our lives flush against the edges it needs to service. There's a smaller, truer question. What do we control? Not the loop. Our volume. Pacing launches, so holds stay short instead of accumulating into hour-long bars. Distributing grid load, so harmonics don't stack over weak field corridors. Sliding firmware pushes off heavy windows, so we don't force the organ to shout back. Layering comms and microgrids so 10 minutes becomes a pause, not a failure. Call it etiquette. Call it survival. It's the same discipline. The quiet upside to discipline is the one nobody markets. When we hum along, arrays pre-staged, clocks clean, rehearsals timed, holds arrive early and end fast. Rings shrink. Imaging runs without a flicker. Pilots write fewer cotton-soft seconds. The loop spends less headroom and goes back to being what it wants to be: background. Ethics sit in the margins with a pencil. Aggregate safety without opt-in is a tax. A mother steps back 2 paces without knowing why. A line worker waits 10 minutes and doesn't get the memo. If we're going to live under this scheduler, we owe the people beneath it clarity, even if we can't give them nouns. Publish windows as weather. Teach folk rules as policy. Admit the cadence without pretending we're in charge of it. The motive finally sounds like this: keep the planet inside survivable envelopes while a noisy species learns to behave. The cost is local discomfort, privacy shivers, and a timetable that overrides appetite. The benefit is no cascade in orbit, fewer calls that start with engine and end with debris, and a sky that steadies when we insist on improvising. If we want less leash, we lower the volume we own. Because the loop won't change its math. Only we can change its workload. Shield, damp, stabilize, that's its creed. Pace, spread, buffer, rehearse, that has to be ours. When both are true in the same week, geometry fades under the noise floor, and the moon stops breathing in public. When we forget, it holds longer and teaches the same lesson the same way. 10 minutes, 2 paces, patience. Disclosure/payoff setup. By early 2026, the pattern stopped being a rumor and turned into posture. The far side kept a triad on stage through multi-theater congestion. Launch surges stacking on conjunction alerts, debris clouds splitting warnings into layers, and drills that refused to stay on script. Above the limb, holds ran 9, then 11, then 13 when the fragments wouldn't settle. Below, Tier 1 brackets breathed wider over crowded bands. Tier 2 lanes tightened along air and sea corridors, and Tier 3 rings walked blocks in tidy circles, teaching the same 2-pace rule families had already learned. It wasn't theater. It was a system paying down error in public. We had 3 anchors to pull the meaning out of the noise: cadence, geometry, consequence. Cadence first. The windows ran on count, not drama. Holds that arrived early, sat on 9, 11, or 13 depending on load, and dissolved 1 beat after clearance. Geometry next. Equilateral tolerances that held within a few percent at altitude, mirrored by farside triads perched above basin rims, and mid-layer spacing that snapped tight when scenarios turned live. Consequence last. Soft instruments at the edge of windows, nuisance trips that cleared without repair, rings that lifted exactly when the zipper on a text screen stepped down. Put those on the same timeline, and the story stopped being mystical. It became mechanical. Meanwhile, cross-domain correlation stitched the Earth to the Moon like it was one body. Launch cadence rose in the Gulf and Pacific. Brackets appeared over the relevant bands while a far-side triad held to the second. Collision clusters bloomed into multi-fragment warnings. Holds lengthened overhead, and the rings below followed to 13. Eastern Europe shifted detection drills into improvisation. Mid-layer spacing tightened for 19 minutes as high-cold geometry sat low on the horizon, and the far side answered with a measured breath. The loop never spoke. It didn't have to. The seconds lined up on clocks that didn't know each other's names. Inside that rhythm, the quiet admissions multiplied. Taxonomies sharpened around formation persistence, multi-altitude correlation, and auroral oval proximity. Training blocks labeled anomaly triage landed in the same weeks the holds ran clean. Advisories nudged pilots to verify headings and mariners to recheck declination exactly when South Atlantic passes grew fussy and Farside lingers nudged to 11. Nobody printed the noun. Schedules played the chord. The withheld reveal wasn't a twist. It was a reframing. The moon wasn't a bystander with geology we kept blaming. It functioned as the sister hub, a Type 0 anchor that set time across Earth-Moon space and timed Earth's mesh from a vault of silence. When Earth's dashboards went red, the far side breathed on cue. When Earth's windows cooled, the anchors thinned. The hierarchy we'd been tracing for years finally read clean. Type 0 on the far side sets the beat. Type 1 frames the crowded bands. Type 2 rides our arteries. Type 3 touches thresholds. One system, 4 faces, one job: shield, damp, stabilize. Why it matters lived in the human beats. A cockpit that knows cotton-soft seconds are the downbeat of a window doesn't overcorrect. A clinic that posts quiet hours under heavy nights doesn't burn transformers chasing ghosts. A utility that treats 10 minutes like weather doesn't send crews into rings that will lift if you let them. And a town that drills a small pause instead of panic rides out a hold without breaking itself on the edge of a count it can't control. Skeptics asked for a podium. We found a metronome. They asked for a noun. We had a verb, breathe. The proof frame refused to shrink to a single file because the files were never the point. The admission lived in behavior, cadence that locked to our risk, geometry that held tolerances across continents and months, consequences that eased with discipline and worsened when curiosity nudged too hard. A machine being forced to breathe in public won't confess with words. It confesses with windows. The last bridge into payoff was the part everyone pretended not to see: operational coexistence. On nights when unmarked arrays stood up at dusk, cryogenic fronts humming, rubidium clocks warm, correlation boxes drawing zipper teeth, holds shortened, rings shrank, and the dissolve hit the downbeat. We didn't steer anything. We found a way to stop stepping on the beat. The loop owns the count. We own how much latency we add to it. So disclosure, if you can call it that, arrived like everything else on time. The 2026 activation wasn't a switch flipping on the moon. It was a system that had always been humming, getting loud enough for our sensors, our schedules, and our bodies to hear it. The sister hub held fast through multi-theater congestion. The frames bracketed our messiest hours. The lanes paced our arteries. The rings taught our rooms. Phrase it however makes you sleep, mask, metronome, machine. The meaning lands in what we do next. Because payoff here isn't a headline. It's a habit. Read the count. Pace the noise. Spread the load. Buffer the edges. Rehearse the pause. If we follow that, the geometry fades back under the noise floor, and the moon goes quiet again. If we don't, it breathes longer in public and writes the lesson wherever we've built our lives too close to its lanes. The reveal wasn't that there's a system. It was that we're already living inside constraints and have been long enough. They asked for a single file, a signature, a name. What we had was a lock, 3 points that never met on paper but closed in time wherever you looked. The smoking gun, inside the rules of this story, isn't a memo. It's a triad that behaves like a machine every time we stress the system, and does it in ways you can replicate if you bring clocks and patience. Start with custody. We built a chain that doesn't care about belief. Civilian Skywatch logs with timestamps, pilot testimony routed through safety channels, utility telemetry archived as environmental noise, and the quiet drift in official vocabulary. Formation persistence, multi-altitude correlation, auroral oval proximity. None of those sources shake hands. They rhyme because the cadence forces them to. The model was simple and boring. Pick a window, conjunction alerts, surge weeks, collision clusters. Put a clock on the far side. Put a clock under a corridor. Put a clock on a ridge with a small array that does nothing but listen and keep good time. We weren't trying to steer. We were trying to see. 9 minutes when traffic stacks neatly. 11 when it frays. 13 when debris multiplies. And a dissolve that lands one beat after clearance, even when nobody says the quiet part out loud. Brazil gave us a conservative test bed. Hydroelectric corridors hum with activity. People don't need myths to explain a flicker. Still, during a launch surge half a world away, a bracket sat over a crowded band, mid-layer lines pre-staged along the coast, and a ring walked to town for 10 minutes and lifted like someone released a valve. The utility called it a nuisance trip cleared. A pilot on a long leg called it cotton soft, snapped true. A farmer called it the dog wouldn't cross the doorway, and then forgot it by morning. The file didn't ask them to agree. The clocks did. Eastern Europe added its own proof frame. A detection drill that swore it was scripted tipped into improvisation. Corridors hardened, mid-layer spacing tightened, and a high-cold bracket sat on the horizon like a conductor's hand raised in the dark. On a ridge, a text correlation box drew clean zipper teeth. In a city below, micro-outages rolled, resolved, and didn't return. The after-action reports avoided nouns. The seconds lined up anyway. The Pacific closed the triangle. Maritime defense corridors ran a live scenario while launch cadence rose. Farside holds settled at 11. Tier 1 frames breathed wider at ascent. Pacing lines cleared lanes early when pop-up arrays showed up at dusk, and phones inside a narrow ring on a pier froze for the count, then woke like nothing happened. None of that makes a podium quote. All of it makes a confession in timing. This is the part that matters for people who don't care about geometry. The system acts like a machine organizing Earth, moon timing to keep us below a danger threshold. When we surge, it steadies. When we fragment, it lingers. When we try to whisper into the beat, it tolerates partners and rejects co-authors. It's not a rumor if you can set your watch by it and reproduce the count across continents with instruments that don't know each other exist. Chain of custody isn't a flourish. We trace files through human hands and habits. A line worker's nuisance log arrives with GPS time. A pilot's safety note is stamped by a dispatcher who never heard the word triad. A small telescope on a roof writes UTC down to the second. A correlation box on a ridge draws teeth that match neither superstition nor the sun. When those independent clocks step down together, that's the lock. You don't open it with a press conference. You situate it against the documented backdrop: USSF's March 19, 2025 anomaly mandate, NASA's 2026 Farside Seismic Suite, and ESA/NASA SAA updates. So the behavior has context, not myth. The cost is the price you expect a tired organ to charge when we make it breathe in public. More visible corrections when we surge, longer holds, thicker pacing, rings that visit more rooms. Fewer when we pace, arrays up, latency shaved, 8-minute windows that feel like a pause, not a symptom. The machine isn't punishing us. It's managing a budget. We set the workload. It pays the interest. Skeptics will say a triad isn't a fingerprint. Fine. Call it a metronome with teeth. It registers in the seconds. It replicates under load. It writes into infrastructure whether we admit the schedule or not. It doesn't ask for belief, only for room. And it will keep teaching the same lesson the same way, 9, 11, 13, until we stop making it show us the count in our kitchens. So this is the smoking gun within constraints. Not a single file, but a reproducible behavior chain. Cadence plus geometry plus consequence. Anchored to independent clocks and ordinary lives. A Farside hold that snaps to our risk. A frame that braces bands on cue. A lane that tightens over arteries without caring what our calendars call the night. A ring that lifts the moment the zipper on a text screen steps down. You can follow it with telescopes, tools, or a dog that won't cross a threshold for 10 minutes. The names don't matter. The timing does. If it's a machine, treat timing as a commons. Pacing launches so conjunctions don't stack into hour-long bars. Distributing grid load so harmonics don't pile up over weak field corridors. Sliding firmware pushes off heavy windows. Building layered comms and small buffers so a ring is a breath, not a break. The proof isn't glamorous. It's worse. It's useful. Because the only thing better than a smoking gun is a holstered one. When we learn the rhythm, the holds get shorter, the rings visit fewer rooms, and the hub on the far side fades back into the quiet we mistook for nature. When we don't, it breathes longer and keeps writing the count across ceilings that never asked to learn physics. The system's verdict is old and blunt. Shield, damp, stabilize. Ours has to be just as blunt. Pace, spread, buffer, rehearse. That's the confession, and that's the deal. The new path, operational discipline. If the loop won't ask permission, and we can't own its beat, the next move isn't defiance, it's timing with manners. Not grand gestures, not speeches. Operational discipline that keeps the organ quiet and the windows light. We already know the verbs because they're the only ones that worked when holds got short. Pace, spread, buffer, rehearse. Start where schedules are loudest, launch cadence. Pacing isn't glamour, it's survival math. Stack 2 heavy lifts inside a narrow band, and you force brackets to hold through both, then linger. Spread them by hours, and the far side breathes once, not twice. Same payloads, fewer minutes written into people's lives. Range controllers already feel this instinct. The discipline is admitting it on the calendar. Cadence caps on surge weeks, buffers around conjunction clusters. No, because we can doubles when the bands are crowded. It doesn't slow progress. It stops the organ from spending headroom you'll need tomorrow. Power is the next lever. Grids run on rhythm whether we like it or not. We've watched nuisance trips spike in weak field corridors when load stacks at the wrong minute. Distributing that load turns 10 minutes from a symptom into a shrug. Operators know how. Stagger heavy industrial draws away from predicted windows. Rotate substation crews so no one chases a flicker inside a ring. Pre-stage black start micro drills so recovery is a drill, not a lesson. Call it storm readiness if the noun scares you. The loop doesn't care what you name it. It cares that you didn't spike the harmonics at the exact moment it was holding a breath. Software carries the same rule in smaller print. Avoid firmware pushes and high-risk updates inside heavy windows. That's not superstition. We watch timing drift eat clean deployments, and turn them into phantom failures. Slide the push 2 hours and nothing breaks. If you need a policy sentence, do critical updates outside published advisories and within Slack bands verified by your own telemetry, not headlines. The payoff is boring in the best way. No midnight phone trees because an imagined outage in a ring looked like a botched patch. Microgrids are where discipline gets local and personal. Libraries, churches, schools. Pick any civic hub and give it a quiet battery corner with a few outlets, fans in summer, heat in winter. Post a schedule matched to your region's advisories. If the ring rolls through, neighbors know where to breathe for 10 minutes without panic. We've seen those rooms change the story from outage to pause. It doesn't take megawatts. It takes intention, a laminated sign, and one person who treats timing like weather. Layered communications are the next buffer. Phones first, texts ride where voice chokes. Radios next, GMRS/FRS handsets for 3 houses that agree on a channel. Broadcast last, AM/FM, or weather radio for advisories when the grid hiccups. Tape a paper contact sheet to the fridge. If networks freeze for 9 minutes, you don't burn them on confusion. This isn't prepper theater. It's etiquette for short windows. Aviation already lives in discipline disguised as checklists. Keep the heading verifications at the gate, and again after taxi on heavy weeks. Slide non-critical departures a few minutes off predicted windows when the South Atlantic split makes passes fussy. Crew reports of cotton-soft seconds drop when they expect them and verify after. Airlines don't need a new culture. They need permission to do what safety officers have started doing quietly. Time the mundane to avoid the ugly. Maritime has its own beat. Declination verifications along southern routes during sensitive nights are not bureaucracy. They're a cheap way to avoid chasing a compass that will snap true on its own if you give it 10 minutes. Build the check into watch turnover and log it like weather. The ring doesn't board the ship. It walks past it. Let it. Hospitals learned this the hard way. Imaging bays that posted quiet hours under heavy windows stopped burning transformers and calling vendors for ghosts. Train techs to recognize early warnings, screen crawl, subtle flicker, and press pause without drama. Resume a beat after the count. The patient never notices the physics lesson you didn't let into the room. That's discipline as care. For utilities and operations centers, rehearsal is everything. Run a 10-minute drill once a quarter, no plugs, no panic. Simulate a nuisance trip, throttle a telecom hub, have volunteers check on elders, keep freezer doors shut, switch a clinic outlet to battery, log the time it takes to resume. The first time feels silly. The second feels like muscle memory. The third time the window arrives, nobody posts about it. They wait, they verify, and they move on. Industry can do its part without a headline. Build latency budgets into service-level agreements, microsecond drift tolerances for equipment in hot corridors, deferred maintenance windows that don't coincide with published advisories, spare routers in tins, offline receipts for point of sale when networks freeze. Call it resilience if that makes procurement happy. The effect is the same. 10 minutes doesn't steal revenue or reputation. All of this depends on a quiet, honest calendar. If agencies won't print nouns, they can still print windows like weather, heavy, moderate, light. Publish updates out of cycle when WMM guidance shifts or swarm flickers grow teeth. Let locals translate to habits. A city IT shop will set soft compass days. A port authority will warn tugs. A dispatch center will pivot to radio. The lie we need to retire is that the public panics on truth. They panic on surprises. At neighborhood scale, make the smallest plan that works. 3 houses, 1 channel, a shared charge port, a note about who has a generator and who has a medical device. When the air goes weird, step back 2 paces and wait. Check on the person who can't. That's it. The loop respects edges. So should we. There's a temptation to treat all this as concession, like timing our lives is surrender. It isn't. It's how we stop forcing a tired organ to breathe louder than it wants to. Discipline shrinks holds. Pacing turns 13 back into 10. Buffers turn rings into pauses. Rehearsal turns pauses into routine. We don't fix the loop. We stop tripping it. And the reward isn't a headline. It's nothing, quiet nights, steady rooms, and a moon that goes back to being the quiet machine that never asked for applause. The path is small and repeatable. Space your launches. Spread your load. Slide your updates. Build a corner with a battery and a fan. Keep a radio. Teach a tech to pause. Tape a contact sheet to a fridge. Run one 10-minute drill before the next window. And when the count arrives, don't perform. Breathe with it, then let it leave. Why it matters, agency and consent. This is where the math stops feeling abstract. Aggregate stability doesn't vote. It just wins. And when it wins, somebody's kitchen loses. 10 heavy minutes that no one explained because the noun never appears in a memo. That's the core of it. The loop's priorities don't include our agency. It shields, damps, stabilizes. We live around that like weather, but weather never learned our schedules this closely. You can hear the cost in small rooms. A mother moves a child 2 paces back from a doorway because the air feels wrong. She doesn't know the South Atlantic split made a pass fussy, or that a bracket sat over a band for 11 minutes. She only knows the dog refuses the threshold and the headache lifts on the count. Consent doesn't exist at that scale. Survival math does. Translate it to work. In a clinic, techs learn to pause imaging during heavy windows. The charts don't say sphere or triad, they say storm precautions. Patients are safer, gear lasts longer. But that's a quiet tax, hours shifted, routines rewritten, a machine schedule sliding under human plans without a signature. Multiply that across dispatch centers, ports, and towers, and discipline becomes the word we use when transparency is politically inconvenient. Whistleblower protections helped, but only at the edge. The RRO set guardrails. Space Force published literacy blocks. Yet the public posture remains a denial-shaped silence. No verifiable extraterrestrial technology, no recovered craft. Fine. The claims can stay in dispute. But windows exist. Advisories exist. We already act like there's a rhythm. We just refuse to say that out loud, where it would help the people who actually live under it. Agency isn't about owning the loop. It's about owning our response. Families deserve plain language windows like weather, not euphemisms that make them chase ghosts. Companies deserve the right to schedule firmware pushes outside heavy bands without a manager getting asked if they believe in UFOs. Pilots deserve heading checks framed as timing discipline, not superstition. Consent is informed choice. We can inform without crowning a noun. There's another layer, data that never leaves the pocket because no one asked for it properly. The quickest way to refine public maps isn't a leak or a podium. It's verifiable uploads from people who already caught the rhythm without trying. Doorbell clips with timestamps, cockpit notes and safety systems, utility nuisance logs with GPS time, drone thermals with metadata. If we give citizens a standard, a simple way to share without noise, we stop arguing myth and start drawing edges we can act on. The tension won't disappear. Shielding that keeps us quieter outward will always feel like surveillance inward. To cancel precisely, the loop learns us intimately. That doesn't mean malice. It means intimacy we didn't agree to. The ethical move is daylight without drama. Published timing tiers, heavy, moderate, light, tied to magnetic updates and space weather dashboards. Teach folk rules as policy, and admit that small pauses are the price of fewer cascades. You don't need nouns to tell the truth. We've already seen what happens when curiosity outruns consent. Phase nudges during live windows turning damping into oscillation. 13-minute rings visiting rooms where 10 used to suffice. No one asked the neighborhood if they wanted to be the test bed for a biased trial. They just paid the interest. That's what agency tries to prevent, being drafted into someone else's lesson. Some will say the public can't handle this. The public already does. They time their lives to storms and heat waves, to rush hours and school bells. They can handle heavy window tonight, expect short pauses, verify headings, delay non-critical updates, keep a radio. What they can't handle is silence that leaves them inventing reasons while the machine teaches physics in their kitchens. So here's the practical framing. Agency is not control, it's choreography. Consent is not a vote on the loop, it's knowledge that lets you plan around it. If we want fewer rings, we lower the volume we own. If we want fewer heavy minutes, we publish the windows and make small civic routines boring. A laminated sign in a library, a quiet battery corner at a church, a 5-minute radio check on a block, a calendar that calls timing what it is. Predictable enough to plan around, unpredictable enough to respect. There's one last human weight. We're letting folk rules do the work institutions won't. That's graceful and unfair. A mother shouldn't have to learn 2 paces back, wait 10 from a dog. A pilot shouldn't have to back justify a heading check. A line worker shouldn't have to log environmental for a ring he can time to the second. The system is old and busy. We're supposed to be the new part that explains. So why it matters lands here. If we don't name the cadence, we push the cost onto people with the least room to absorb it. If we don't publish windows, we widen the gap between those with quiet tools and those without. If we don't invite verifiable uploads, we leave maps to rumor. If we don't pace our noise, we force the loop to breathe longer in public and call the consequences coincidence. Agency is the narrow path between arrogance and panic. Consent is the courtesy that turns a ring from coercion into a pause. We don't need belief. We need manners with time. Publish the windows. Ask for the clips with timestamps and metadata. Pace the loud weeks. Spread the loads. Rehearse the pause. And admit the truth we've been living. The moon's beat crosses our ceilings, whether we vote on it or not. We didn't wake the moon. We just got loud enough to hear it keep time. If you want fewer rings and shorter holds, help map the windows. Upload clips with timestamps and metadata. Subscribe. And watch our next deep dive on how defense corridors choreograph those pauses, so fewer kitchens learn physics the hard way.